Very good morning to all our dear listeners and viewers. It's an afternoon somewhere, an evening somewhere, but it's a pleasure always to have you join us around this time every Friday, same time, same place, when we discuss the issues at hand that are worth probably sharing and ensuring that the public gets a deep understanding on some of these issues of national concern. Welcome to Acfim Talks, your host Felix Kafuma, and today we are discussing Uganda, a nation choking on loans. This Friday, the 4th, it's a happy new month, and I should say happy new month. Before we start, because I'll be joined by two distinguished guests to make sense of this conversation. But before we start, like it's my practice, I usually take a minute to first welcome all of you who are joining us, but also encourage everybody out there to be part of this discussion. We are live on Facebook, on Twitter, and also on YouTube. On Facebook, we are live at Acfim UG, on YouTube, Acfim UG, and Twitter. Our handle is at Acfim UG. You can be part of this conversation, sending your comments and also your questions if you have any, and then you can enrich the discussions. And that said, today we want to take a detour and look at Uganda and where we stand in terms of our public debt, but also what does the future hold? You and me, and probably the unborn, what kind of country are we going to leave behind? Just been having a discussion back end with the panelists I'll be introducing in a short while. But he left behind a question before I came on set. What kind of country, you and me, are we going to leave behind for our generation to come? And there's no better time than discussing that question now. And we look at Uganda, a nation. Is it a nation choking on loans? And where are we coming from? Just to give a little bit of a background, if you've been following in the news, in the national news, Parliament yesterday approved a loan of 1.7 trillion Uganda shillings, which apparently government is going to get from Standard Chartered Bank and other financial institutions to finance development and infrastructure. In a nutshell, we are getting what I would call a commercial loan, not a concessional loan. And although there have been protests from some of the members in the House, in the 11th Parliament, where majority are from the opposition, that have looked at this loan to be not a palatable loan for Uganda, with high costs. And apparently more of a commercial loan as opposed to a concessional loan. Government has gone ahead and secured an approval from Parliament that is majority the National Resistance Movement MPs. Already, as we stand, Uganda's public debt stock stands at shillings 79 trillion, and I must also add, at 79 trillion, we are struggling to pay our creditors as a country. So the newly approved loan will now bring Uganda's debt portfolio to Uganda shillings 80.7 trillion. If you add the 79 plus the 1.7, yes, and that will mean we would have increased our percentage of loan to more than 23%, from 69.5 trillion by the end of 2020-2021 financial year to current. So that 1.7 trillion loan that we are going to get from Standard Chartered and other financial institutions that are not yet named is going to increase our domestic debt to 32.4 shillings in terms of trillion shillings, from 30.7 trillion shillings as of financial year 2020-2021. And this comes at the heels when President Museveni also, while having a meeting with the members of the Uganda Bankers Association, warned against excessive internal borrowing. So as the Uganda's As Uganda's public debt continues to soar, with no signs of slowing down amidst the skyrocketing mismanagement of public affairs, remember that the IG's report released last year, October, reported that Uganda loses approximately 20 trillion to corruption through procurement and budgeting, among others. Remember, we are talking about getting a loan and our debt portfolio, but on the other hand, we are looking at the hemorrhage of public resources through corruption. So in today's episode, we take a detour to understand the implication of the growing debt burden and what does the future hold for Ugandans, me and you out there who's listening. What does this mean? Welcome once again to Acfim Talks. And with me, I've been joined by two gentlemen. Let me start with Charles. Charles is on set. Charles Mulozi Olwen, who is the public policy analyst and a human rights defender. Charles currently works with the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. AFSA. Charles, it's good to have you for today's Acfim Talks.
Pleasure joining you, Felix, and the team of Acfim.
Great. I expect to have Moses Mushime, who is a lawyer and an economist. Moses has been on this show before. He should be joining us. He's the current executive director of Open Health Network and also a partner with Chibuka Rashid and Company Advocates. When he gets on set, I will introduce him again. But as we wait for Moses to join us, I think we can kick it off since I have Charles. If for those who don't know, Charles is also an activist. In his other world, is an activist, and I believe once an activist, always an activist. Yes, Moses, it's good to have you. I can see you are on set.
Thank you.
I did introduce you. I can hear you very well. I did introduce you in your absence, and it's glad always to have you. Hope you've been well.
I've been well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Let's pick this up, and let me start with you, Charles. I'm so sure you've been following the recent trophy of 1.7 in terms of our debt. We've added on something on our debt portfolio, so we've grown our debt portfolio to 80.7 trillion as it stands now. So let's say that we Ugandans, we are accustomed to the behavior of borrowing. And just want to pick your thoughts here. What are your thoughts? First of all, is it justifiable? Is it necessary for us to have this loan? Like I said, there are those who have argued that this loan is not good for us. But what are your thoughts on this loan?
Hi, Felix, and the team of Acfim, viewers and listeners, good morning. Thank you so much for hosting me and also inviting me to share my opinions with the Ugandans. When we talk about debts, the debts question in Uganda is part of the bigger governance question in this country, because debt is part of the bigger governance questions. And also to underscore the most important aspect, like every country is borrow. But the countries which borrows, they borrow for certain reasons. They just don't borrow for consumptive, and they don't borrow for buying tear gas. They don't borrow for refunding what they call wrong kind of borrowings to service the debts. They borrow to service the debts. So people borrow for very strategic reasons. And as I said, the governance question in this country is not very different, because debt is a symptom. Excessive debt is a symptom of a very poor state, a poor governed state. And for me, that's where we need to start from. And this question, as for long, has been left to politicians to decide. So most citizens in this country decided to take the back seats and allow politicians to run the show. And these conversations, institutions like Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, the Uganda Debt Network, most of these institutions, Action 8 International Uganda, the Anti-Corruption Coalition, have been raising these eyebrows that states, look, to borrow money, there are a number of systems that we need to talk, and I need to build from this, Felix. when I talk about governance, that governance is in terms of putting a system, institutions, individual, and the structures that can hold individual accountable. But in the last 3 to 4 decades, the system of this country is left to individual, and individual determine what is right and what's wrong. And this right and wrong can only be defended by that same individual or group of individuals. I always call them economic hitmen. And I've made it a number of times that the people who borrow and the members of parliament who are defending and they've approved this loan, are they first citizens of this country? Because if you're a citizen of this country, you know that the kind of the life and the decisions we are taking, it has a severe implication in terms of the future of this country, but also the development trajectory of this country. So there are two things I need to talk about very, very kind of in line with your question. First of all, these loans and any other loans, which has amount to 80.7 million. It is completely unnecessary because there is no justification. The parliament yesterday made a very strong argument that there's some amount of money, over 80+ billion, has been given to individuals in this country. There's number of trillions has been given to individuals in this country to run their projects. So I think the question of borrowing in this country has become, it is at individual wish. If someone feel like I need to do this, I need to go and run and borrow. So let me end with this and allow Moses to come in 3 important aspects that we need to know. The kind of loans that we borrow is going to have implication on 3 important aspects. One, the quality of the public service. As we talk right now, the public service system in this country is dysfunctional. The entire public service is dysfunctional. I saw him, President Yoweri Museveni Kagota was fighting about the theft in the National Drug Authority. Like our drugs now in DRC, in West Africa, in Southern Africa, and we are servicing the entire East and Southern Africa. I heard him talking about a number of processes in this country. So we cannot talk about all this borrowing if we don't deal with corruption. And the corruption has been part and parcel of the survival mechanism of the current regime. In the last so many years, they've been part of they are being in government. So therefore, if you have a system of governance which is unaccountable, debts become part of a survival because the service delivery is not working, the economic system is working, almost 75% of Ugandans are struggling to eat. Therefore, you cannot raise taxes to service and manage the appetite for the money that we need to sustain this country. And this followed with a dysfunctional education system. So the broken society that we have, that has been created in the last 30 years plus, it is a manifestation that loan become inevitable. And this inevitability of loan is just not about today, but they say, let's do it what Pepsi says, live for now. So we have individuals who are in position of government policy, in government institutions, that they're actually living for now. And the question is, do they have children? Based on the question you've asked earlier, what kind of country are we living to these people? So it is incumbent upon me and you and the elites who are part of this country to avoid the French Revolution of the 1789, whereby the elites became the problem. So we need to reflect and ask ourselves, what kind of country are we going to leave to the citizens and to the children that is going to come after us? We need to join hands and push back and make sure that we remove politicians out of the circles and make sure that we start putting system, institutions, and policies that can hold individuals accountable, and probably this kind of loan can be avoided in future. Thank you.
A little bit of breaking up there. Just losing you, but it's okay. I think I got your point, and I'm going to come back to you on that one, on the issue of what kind of borrowing are we having as a country, because on many occasions, the argument has been that you are borrowing because you have a shortfall in financing your budget. But remember, you have a shortfall in financing your budget, but you have a leakage of 20 trillion annually to corruption, almost half of your annual budget. Quite interesting. Uganda is. Moses, you are an economist. Help us make sense of this loan, because for me, first of all, is it necessary? Is it justifiable? But why are we going for a commercial loan as opposed to a concessional loan? And what's wrong with this? Let's look at the 1.7 before even we look at our bigger debt portfolio. What is wrong with this particular loan of 1.7 trillion, or what is right with it?
I can tell you, for all intents and purposes, there is nothing right with this loan. First of all, in a period such as this, where there is a slowdown in economic growth, where we are even bordering a recession, there is no way why a country like Uganda would go for a non-concessional loan, for example. We know, for example, this loan from the Standard Chartered Bank, it has what they have called guarantor fees. They have agency fees, because the agency, in fact, the Standard Chartered Bank is not the bank that is going to give the loan. It is an agency, it is the mediator. In a more simplistic way, it is a broker, it is doing brokerage. This money is coming from other financial institutions, and this one is going to manage. Now, why wouldn't, for example, a country go direct to those people? Because they are going to pay agency fee of 15,000 euros per year. They are going to pay guarantor fees, and they are going to pay contingency fees. The grace period is just 4 years. 4 years is just days away from today. But there are loans, for example, from other multilateral lending institutions like World Bank, like IMF, where you have a grace period of over 10 years with zero interest rate sometimes, or even interest rate that is up to 1%. The interest rate they have told us here is about, depending from which financial institution, is between 2.5 and 3.9. That is very high, because there are other concession loans that will get better. But why would, for example, a country Uganda go for this loan? I think, in my opinion, it's because this loan is not conditional. This is money that can be abused, and that is the only motivation. And there are blockers within this arrangement. When you compare to other concession loans that will get, maybe they would say, this money we want it in the health sector. This money we want it in education sector. This, there are no conditions. The conditions is just that Parliament should approve. Attorney General should give an opinion. But they are not saying you want improvement in, for example, delivery of services. We are in a period where there is hike in food prices. This money is not going to go for agriculture. This is money that you can abuse anyhow. And that is very dangerous, Michael. That one I have to tell you. So there is nothing good about this one anyway. In a period like this, where there is slowdown in economic growth, but also where we do not have virtually, I've been told that now public servants are paid in shifts. We are in a period where there is food shortage, lean period. What is the government doing to boost food production? What is our food policy, for example, for this country? So I think we are headed for worse times, and this alone is going to make the situation worse actually.
Wow.
That's what
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Moses. You have been as blunt as it gets, but true, and a patriot as it can be. Let me come to you, Charles. You've had Moses. There is nothing right about this loan, and there's something he has talked about, which apparently, when I come back to the literature about this loan, they have argued that this loan is specifically for it's a commercial loan that is meant to finance development and infrastructure. Remember, it's not conditioned. But when the MPs put to task to the minister to explain what are some of those development projects that you're going to finance using this loan, until now that list is yet to be shared. And then that brings me to the question that I want to ask you, Charles. The terms of the loan, for sure, they are not friendly. It is a commercial loan. So when you read into what Moses has said, why would government push through a bad loan? What could be the underlying interests here?
Thank you, Felix. I first strongly resonate with the submission from Moses. I think he made it, he nailed it just. And that resonate also with the conversation I had with you earlier before this meeting. Like, you know, a country which is run from a speculative point of view, a speculative kind of in a black market. Uganda is run like a black market country. So everything is speculative. And as Moses has rightly alluded, that they are brokers, they are beneficiaries. Before they go for loan, already know who is taking which share, who is taking what. It's very clear. And in just a difficult time when the citizens, the majority citizens are grappling with basic right to food, we can't talk about development. We've been talking about development in the last 36, 37, 40 years of Museveni's governance. The roads you cannot drive, the electricity mentioned everything. These are these guys. It is development in quote, because the easiest way to persuade, I always make jokes that we are citizens, I think, with the lowest memory capacity, that our memory lasts as long as the topic ends. So as soon as this borrowing ends, everything ends. There's another borrowing and something. So as Moses has rightly stated in his submissions, that there is, first of all, there is no development. There is no development in all this process. There's a whole kind of a plan, a big project that individuals are running. There's a plan for 2026. That one you don't need to leave it, and that's also the problem. We always talk about symptoms. We don't want to talk about the problem that this country has been grappling with in the last 60 years of independence. The question of politics. The politics is a very important aspect. Everything is driven by politics in this country. The 2026, I come near a village, I don't want to mention that. I see deployments day in, day out. I see a lot of processes. There are individuals already who strongly believe that this country, they know the future, they know the history, they know where it is. They're already planning something up. So there's first no development. At this time, we don't need development fund. We need money that invests in food system, that can stabilize prices, that can invest in agriculture, where majority of the citizens are deriving their livelihood from. So Felix and the great teams of Acfim, we need to, first of all, start picking interest about the governance question about this country, about the political question about this country, in terms of how we're going to start conversations about changing the whole thinking and the mindset of the politicians. I used to have a lot of conversation with the members of parliament. Everything is a commercial in this country. Before a bill is brought in parliament, there are people who have earned a certain amount of money already. As Moses has alluded, he did not mention directly, but he said there are brokers, there are mediators, there are beneficiaries, and all these aspects. And members of parliament have become the easiest traders in this country. They are there for selling and for buying. They are just available for anything available, where anything to be picked. So you have a country where there's everything is to be picked. So you, Felix, what are you going to pick from this country? Moses, what are you going to pick? And it's going to be a dangerous kind of trajectory in terms of shaping the governance and accountability question of this country. So as Moses has rightly indicated, there is nothing good for this loan, and nobody should even go ahead to justify and defend it. The question is, how are we going to make sure that we push back? And probably I like the conversation from members of parliament that they need to sue parliament. So can we start some litigation process to make sure that members of parliament, they don't have immunity to trade off this country and sell off this country? So until we all say we are citizens of this country, any loan will need to be consulted, any loan will need to be part and parcel of the conversation, because in any case, this has to pay. And that is, for me, is the most important question. And the lastly, to end with, institutions like Standard Chartered Bank, there should be action. There should be action from the citizens, and one of the Ugandans who have account in Standard Chartered Bank. Can we withdraw all our accounts from the Standard Chartered if they want to be part of the people who are going to mismanage and probably destroy this country? I was in Denmark sometime when there was aspect of money laundering in one of the big bank in Denmark. The citizen withdrew all their money. So the question of citizenship, the question about patriotism, which is not taught in the school which Museveni and the team are running, the patriotism and citizenship, we need to stand up and be counted that some of these upheavals need to be defended, and we need to say no for such kind of loan and any other act that will further destroy our governance structures, but also put us very vulnerable in terms of dealing with our future and development trajectory.
Interesting. I usually have some banters with a colleague called Henry Muguzi, and he keeps asking this question: whether do we have citizens in Uganda? He kept referring to citizens, and he usually asks, do we have citizens in Uganda or do we have occupants of the territory? But I'll come back to that at some point, because there's a question around what can we do as citizens. But let's broaden this subject now beyond the 1.7, because this is just one of those many loans, and it's not the last one either. And I was looking at the statistics here between financial year 2019 and 2020 and the financial year 2022 and 2021. Our public debt has increased from 59.1 trillion to 80.7 trillion. That is growing by more than 23%. And that is faster than the growth of our economy. So anybody out there should really get concerned. Then I ask myself, and I'm coming to you, Moses, here, what is the problem when you look at that trajectory of growth in terms of public debt portfolio? But also, what explains this unquenchable thirst for loans? Is it an issue of poor public management, poor planning? What is the actual problem here?
Thank you, Felix. And my colleague pointed out the real problem is a problem of governance and accountability. This country has a domestic resource mobilization strategy put up by the Ministry of Finance. We expect our taxation policy to be robust. We expect collection modalities to be robust, so that we mobilize sufficient local revenues to support our budget. But that is not the case. We have good laws, and I can tell you this, across East Africa, when you compare particularly to Kenya and Rwanda, Uganda has the most generous taxation system, where people move out with incentives, with concessions, and they are not paying taxes at all. I can name individual companies, if time allowed, individual companies in mining, in manufacturing, who are not paying taxes, be it corporate tax, be it value-added tax, be it excise tax. They are not paying at all, including the recent EACOP company project that is going to manage all oil exports. They have been exempted from taxes, any form of taxes, for the next 10 years. And research has shown that actually those generous provisions, those exemptions in our taxation and fiscal laws do not attract investment, they do not attract good jobs, they do not improve people's welfare, and that is where the problem is. We need to check our fiscal and taxation laws, but also we need to empower URA to correct and generate, or rather to collect more revenues that will support our budget. Because this is an external loan. We are in a period of exchange rate volatility. Government has not told us how much we've lost since the dollar shoot up in terms of debt servicing and repayment. Those statistics have been kept somewhere. They are not telling us, but I can tell you, if the dollar shot from 3,500 now to 3,800, there is a lot we've lost, because a bigger part of our component, about 63% of our loans, are external loans. So there are risks about them, and this is very, very, very dangerous. In terms of where we are heading, I think we have a fiscal charter policy for the next 5 years. It has told us that we should not borrow beyond 50% of our GDP, nominal GDP. But when you look at the projections that the Ministry of Finance has given us, they're expecting our debt to GDP ratio to shoot to about 53% in financial year 2023, 2024, before it oscillates down to about 51 in 2025, 2026. So there is a big problem. I can tell you that, for example, much as we have a 48 trillion budget, 14%, over 7 trillion, is going to debt reservicing and debt payment. without talking about what they call domestic refinancing, where you borrow here and pay here. So the budget they give us, around 30% of it, that money is not there. 14% is going to debt payment and servicing. About another 16% is going to debt refinancing. So 30% of the budget, not in Ugandan hands, not anywhere you'll get it. And I think it is high time, it is the right time now we tame the appetite for these external loans, particularly on like this where we do not have a work plan, for example. No one in government, as we talk now, can tell you what this money will do. This money is going to come and it is very vulnerable to abuse. And I can tell you, if we are to track how this money is spent in the next 3-4 years, if we intended to do so, many people would be in jail. Over to you, Felix.
Thank you so much. And that brings us to a short break. Let's break. And then when we return, we'll continue with the conversation. And I'll be starting with you, Charles. Let's go for a break.
A cup of coffee, please. There is tea, everything. Snacks are on the way.
Your thanks, but the reason that's why we are here, our people need public services. We at least need an ambulance at every center free.
My sub-county is the forest. We used to depend on the former MP's vehicle, but when he lost his elections, he took away his vehicle.
Of course.
So what does that mean?
Use your budget as a district to procure the ambulances.
If I could, I would. But unfortunately, government operates differently.
I'm saying, Chairperson, this is very serious and urgent.
Yes. I know. And why are they called local leaders then?
Local government.
You people, who sent you here?
I know, of course. We are concerned citizens who are watching people dying every day.
We've lost our beloved ones just because of poor health services.
Yes.
Something has to be done.
You are right. Something has to be done.
Yes.
And very fast.
Yes.
That's transport for you. Go back.
But
All your concerns are taken care of. I will handle.
But
Have a
Chairman,
safe journey.
Thank you so much.
but this money seems to undermine our cause as to why we're here.
No, don't misunderstand me. This is just transport. No strings attached.
Chairman, we came here to discuss and find solution to our problems. But it seems you don't want to engage with us. Let's go and mobilize people, and you'll see how serious we are.
Good citizens, let us always hold our leaders accountable. Leadership is a service, not a privilege.
Contribute today at www.politicalfinanceafrica.org/donate.
You're still watching Acfim Talks, and we are discussing Uganda, a nation choking on debts. What does the future hold? And with me, I have two distinguished gentlemen. I have Moses Mushimo, who is the lawyer and economist, but I also have Charles Mulos, who is a public policy analyst and human rights defender. Before we went for the break, we were still making case of what are the implications of this debt to you and me, and this is why I bring in Charles here, because Charles, on many occasions, I think if you've been following the news, you've heard of situations where local governments and ministries return money at the end of the financial year, having failed to spend it. Of course, they cite a number of reasons. One of them being the short time within which they're supposed to spend the money. But I'm a lay person. So when I hear that they are returning money to the coffers, and then I also hear that we are borrowing to finance a shortfall in the budget, I get confused. And now let me ask a very blunt question that a layperson would ask: who is fooling who?
Thank you so much, Felix. I think Ugandans are fooling fellow Ugandans. We are fooling each other. So let me give you, I think it's by institutions as well as by the structure, the local government are set to fail. While I was at ActionAid, I used to work very closely as I was leading the governance and social accountability program of ActionAid. There are three aspects that I was able to deeply understand. First of all, in terms of staffing, the local government, most of the local government Ugandans, they are below 56% in staffing. That's the first and the fundamental issues. There are districts like Lamour, you find that district like Lamour, but most of these districts, almost 60% of the districts, you find one person holding around 4 or 5 positions. And holding that one, you hold a substantive positions and then 4 as acting capacity. And therefore, sometimes even making a quorum for procurement meeting is a challenge. So the staffing is already the beginning of a problem to start with. And then there are also stringent system and policies. The public procurement and the disposal policy itself is a whole crisis in the local government. The remittance or the transfer of money from the central government to local government has significantly improved to some extent, we appreciate. But there are hurdles that has never been addressed. Sometime by the time this money reaches the district, it's closer to the end of the financial year. And if you act otherwise, not following the whole process of the public, the PPC policy, you're bound to have a challenge. So most of these governments are set to fail. I can give you a case of Pade. Pade district is one of the districts that make substantial refund every financial year. It's a district with one street road. That's one road. It has no district hospital in the last 20 years of its operation plus. So there's a lot of challenge the district is facing, but it's one of the districts that transfer a lot of money to the consolidated fund. So as I said, the local government, first of all, are set to fail. They receive very small amount of money, percentage in terms of budget allocation. And second, they are set to fail. And already, as I said, there are economic hitmen in this country that understand they set everything to fail, whether it is a program, whether it's a budget allocation. By the time I allocate money, I was following when the current, the secretary to the treasury, when he was making a remark during the budget dialogue. He said, before even the transfer for the first quarter of the new financial year has been sent out, there are already supplementary budget. So the people who sit and determine this budget in this country, they already set up a whole process that this amount of money, I will hold it, I'm going to ask it, and I will get it. So local governments are part of the bigger victims of the governing question in this country. They are set to fail. Anyone working in local government is a real struggle. Through the association called Uganda Local Government, ULGA, Uganda Local Government Association, ULGA. They've tried to advocate, but they keep looking for individuals. Wonderful and brilliant people, like the Minister of Local Government. These are people who have led ULGA. Very brilliant. They look for individuals, pick them, co-opt them in the system, the politics of co-op, the politics of bribery, the politics of money, the politics of bribery, the politics of intimidation, the politics of everything. So the individual good citizens in local government to sit and watch. They read newspapers, wait for their salary, life go on. So by policy, by structures, by system, local government are set to fail. And the people who are failing are the economic hitmen who are running this country, and they're not giving up. They're going to push as much as possible, provided their interest is sustained. They can't do anything to fail the country, to fail the individual within the country, and to fail the institution within the country.
Thank you so much. You are still watching Acfim Talks. You can be part of this conversation. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Our Twitter handle is at Acfim UG, and then Facebook, it's Acfim. Also YouTube, it's Acfim. You can post your question there or your comment and we'll be able to pick it up. Let me come to you, Moses. What is the implication of this debt stock to a common person? Should I get concerned? I was reading somewhere that as of now, I owe government in terms of debt repayment 1.5 million. And actually, it was saying every Ugandan owes the data 1.5 million Uganda shillings. But paint a picture. What is the implication of this growing debt portfolio? Why would I get concerned?
Thank you, Felix. I think that statistic has increased. That was for last year, when our debt was around 65 trillion. Now we're at 80. So the figure is increasing. I think by next year it will be 2 million that each Ugandan owes to the money lenders, actually, and a big part of it is to external or money lenders. But the implication is, for example, when you look at our budget envelope, if we say that 48 trillion is our budget, but remember, that is our financial budget, but we remember our debt is 80 trillion. So that one gives you, first of all, the basis where to start, the angle from which we attack this pandemic that we are in. Now, when you look at the budget composition, there is a composition of debt refinancing. Debt refinancing means that you borrow this bank or you borrow from this money lender and pay the other money lender. That one does not go even in our financial system or the government revenue streams. That one happens if you open the budget for this financial, for example, you'll notice that close to 8 trillion is on budget, or rather debt refinancing. I had already alluded to that. The other bit, and this one is even more dangerous because it is coming from our local revenue. 7 trillion out of 48 trillion is going to debt repayment and interest rate. That is debt reservicing. Now, when we scale it down to future generations, that is a burden future generations that have not even enjoyed this money, because this money is being abused. There is a lot of corruption in central government, in local government. These civil servants, they are just there to look at avenues to embezzle these resources. I can tell you, and I think if we have Ministry of Ethics and Integrity, they are not doing enough. What is in government is sheer theft, embezzlement, corruption, all sorts of manners. There is no one who is there to deliver services. And that is very dangerous. That's why you see all the malls, if these upcoming suburbs, those who are building there are civil servants. Where are they getting the money with the salary we know they get? So we need to overhaul the system and think about how do we use this money effectively and efficiently. This is a burden that we are transferring to future generations. If we are talking about servicing these debts, it means there is an opportunity cost. That is a hospital foregone. That is a school foregone. That is a road foregone. And that is where we are heading to. Now, these loans, at times, they are not inherently bad. That one, I must make it clear. We notice we are taking some steps towards being financially and fiscally independent in terms of what you look at local revenue input into our budget. But we are still way below. We are maybe at around 50. No one will tell you these statistics, because if we say that our resource envelope is, in terms of what URI corrects, is around 24, 25 trillion. But we tell you that our budget is 48 trillion. Where is the 23 trillion going to come from? It is through borrowing. No one is telling you that. That is the sheer statistics that everyone is hiding from. Now, Here we are. How many Ugandans are employed that have income? That means a few of them are even shouldering this animal called debt servicing. The easiest income to tax in Uganda is employment income. Those struggling to go into middle class, who are not even there. Those are the people who are taxed because it is very easy to tax employment income. But we have a lot of people in what they call informal sector. People earning billions, but they are still informal sector. Those ones do not pay taxes. So I think we need to rethink about how we manage our fiscal regimes, how we mobilize these domestic resources, and how we rationalize spending, but also emphasizing the issue of stamping out corruption. Because loans like this we are discussing, which do not have conditionalities, which are not released in trenches, because some loans, if you go to multilateral institutions, and I'm not vouching for them that they are good, like World Bank, like IMF, they will tell you shall release this money in trenches based on these conditions. If they are fulfilled, they will say, let's plan. They have a framework within which they will give the money. They are guided by principles that are known. They are open to critique. All those things are not there with this loan. So, in a nutshell, the future generations, our children and grandchildren, are going to suffer the consequences of this high appetite for loans. And that is very dangerous for the country. If we do not rethink our domestic resource mobilization strategies and implement them and empower URA, first of all, to be independent, make sure that we squeeze out these generous incentives that limit our capacity to collect local revenues, then that is, I don't think we are going to have a sustainable fiscal framework within which one will guarantee that there is no inflation, that the economy is growing, but most importantly, citizens get the services they need. Over to you, Felix.
Thank you so much, Charles. And as I write on that last point Moses has made, apparently Uganda and like any other and the many African countries who are falling in love with the cupcake of China in terms of an avenue to get loans from. And also China is seen as one of those countries that doesn't give a lot of conditions on their loans. But looking at our behavior, let me call it a behavior. We are a consumptive country. That is one. Two, but we also have a lot of hemorrhage in terms of public resources being stolen. What is the danger of being indebted to countries like China, especially when you look at the sovereignty of Uganda in the years to come? Because I'm trying to pick that up from the implications of this kind of loans, both concessional and non-concessional loans, but also where are you getting the loan from is another issue that needs to be discussed. What are the implications of Uganda's appetite and interest in loans like from countries like China?
Thank you so much. And every time I reflect about this country called Uganda, if you still love this country and you build on the question of citizenship, you shed tears because the directions the country is taking is wrong, and everything about this country is getting into the direction that everyone needs to get concerned and get worried about that. The whole appetite about loan from China, there are three important aspects I need to underscore. The first one is conditionality, which Moses talked about earlier. China is about their interests. It's not about interests of building your democratic institutions, it's not about building a system of governance, it's not about building system of accountability. It's about what can China get? If I give you this, and always what they want to get is bigger than what they give. So for me, that's the first thing. It's about the question of the state's, the country's sovereignty. Because if you become extremely indebted as a country, it becomes very difficult for you to make a decision about how you govern your own country. Because there is going to be a third force is going to dictate how your policies need to be developed. It's going to dictate how your natural resources need to be managed. It's going to dictate how you need to actually run your own affairs in your country. So the question of state sovereignty got eroded completely because partly you've delegated part of your life to some individual external factor who is going to run your life. That's the first and the most important fundamental issues that we need to reflect as a citizen of this country, that getting these loans, as much as you want to do, you want to get, it has implication about your sovereignty, state sovereignty. We are celebrating 60 years of independence, but if I ask you, independent from what? Independent from what? We are never independent. Moses just talked about the question of the in terms of our managing our own national budget. You have a country that almost 40 plus of your national budget is managed by someone else. You're not independent. You can't claim that independent country. There's nothing to celebrate. I hear people writing everywhere, 60 years of independence, going to Kololo to waste little resources. We are never independent. And that infringes on your sovereignty, state sovereignty, because you not have a territorial independence to make decisions about your own affairs. That's the first and the most important thing. So that's the bigger implication. So why is it China? I told you, one, China is about their interest. And the interest for China is about their 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Because of the populations, people know that they are almost a highly populated country, more than 1.4 billion out of the 7 plus something billions in the world. So they need to create territory across the world so that the Chinese have home, Chinese can sustain the interests of socio-economic needs in their country, and they're very clear. Secondly, the conditionality we talk about, that some of these Western countries, they always create loans in Turkey to democracy, good governance, good leadership, building institutions of governments to be in position to respect and protect the fundamental human rights. Mainly dictatorial states in Africa, Uganda inclusive, I'll speak proudly, they don't want to be held accountable because they want to remain demigod. They get their money, use it as they wish, they spend it as they wish, and nobody should hold them accountable. So the waste over time has become problematic. And China said, I don't care about the human rights. Provided I give you money, you confirm that you're going to pay me back, either in cash or in kind, I will give you the money. So it becomes easy. The conditionality of accessing money from China is very low compared to the Western world. Third and the last and the most important thing is the whole question about geopolitics. The question of geopolitics, the continuous colonization, the quest to recolonize and remanage African continent, because the natural resources, both human, natural, it remains in the Europeans and most of the Western part, and Asians have learned it. Asians have learned that the British government or the UK is as it is because of the lot of resources that we pick from Africa. The America is what it is because of the contribution from Africa. So the whole quest about the continuous colonization of Africa, continuous management of Africa, remain part and parcel of the Western world as well as the China. So China has learned that the only way to deal with this thing is to up their game. And to up their game is to make sure that you provide incentives. And the incentives are always creating this kind of avenue which make it very easy for African government, especially those who don't want to adhere to the fundamental governance structure, system, and they run as demigods. So those are the broadly the question. But how is this going to the implications? What Moses talked about it. Like over time, we have seen that the African citizens they've started to take a back seat. You know, by the time I used not to move a lot in African countries, I used to think that Ugandan problem was very exceptional problem. But when you go to most African countries, especially where the one which have president that has run for more than 20 years plus, the problem is copy and paste. You go to Cameroon, you go to Togo, you go to most of these countries where the president has stayed for so long. The question of debts, the questions of corruptions, these ones are not called corruption, theft. Yesterday, one thing which shocked me with members of parliament when they say that we have given over 80 billions to a private individual businessman. We have given over 140 billions to another private individual person who's running a private company, and we need a certain billions to borrow. It is shocks. But how are the citizens doing? We're all holding our hands, and we say, is there money? In one way or another, we are going to pay significantly. by you having no land or your public lands being taken away, because all these are implications of excessive debts, because you're going to lose your natural heritage, you're going to lose every little resources, whether it's natural water, whether it is forest, because they're going to come and take it as part of repayment for the loans that we are getting. So for me, the message I have for Ugandan citizens and everyone who love this country, we stop being tribe mates and we stop being idiots. We need to accept to be citizens and take action and responsibility that push back these individuals who are mortgaging this country and who are selling this country to the easy buyers and to the buyers who are just there to pick this country up. Thank you. I hand over back to you, Felix.
Thank you so much, Charles. Brings back us back that question: are we citizens? Are we occupants of a territory? As we bring this to a close, I have about 5 minutes to get out of here. Moses, how do we get out of this debt trap?
Thank you, Felix, and my colleague Charis. Before I talk about how to get from the debt trap, I need to emphasize that one of the dangers of these loans, especially loans from countries, for example, such as China, is that at one point we should not be surprised when we see public assets being seized. It has happened in other African countries where strategic assets like airports are taken over because, much as they do not tell you, if we did an audit of our dates, in most of these dates we put public assets, corporations' assets, as collateral security. And in case of default or failure to pay, they can be taken over. And these contingencies are materializing day by day. In fact, I can tell you now, government is on pressure to service and pay these dates. More pressure than the pressure they are feeling when it comes to payment of civil servants. Because a money lender can embarrass you in several ways, which maybe a public servant cannot. So I'm telling you that if government was to make a choice between servicing the debt and paying these workers who toil day to day, particularly, for example, teachers and health workers, who may not have these other resources that other workers are stealing, government would choose servicing the debt, and that is very dangerous for the country. And also it has an implication on service delivery. Now, what we can do, it is very simple. We have a domestic resource mobilization strategy. It may not be robust, but even the provisions in there have not been implemented. How many Ugandans pay tax? How many Ugandans evade tax? How many companies are stashing their wealth and income in other countries without paying taxes, their fair share of taxes? How many companies are exempted from taxes and they are not paying workers? They don't look after their workers. They are not, do not have social programs that support communities, and yet they are extracting materials, resources, minerals from Ugandan soil. There is a whole hullabaloo and noise about oil. How have we strategized to harness or to maximize, to optimize revenue generation from our oil? The indicators we have, and particularly with the amendment of Public Finance Management Act in 2021 last year, and the Airport Special Provisions Act, we've seen that we are going to lose a lot of revenue from the oil through these generous tax incentives. So we need to patch up these holes in our taxation policies. We need to bring a bigger spectrum of people into the taxation equation, which is not the case, but also see how we maximize these other local revenues. We have a lot of corporations that are making losses. The other day you saw the saga with Uganda Airlines. We have corporations in this country, Uganda Railways, we have many that will be making business for the government, but they are not. So there are a lot of ways we can do to boost local resource mobilization, both from tax and non-tax revenue, but also ensuring that once these tax or these revenues are generated, they are not abused. That is the most important thing, Felix and Charles. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that submission. And it's the top of the hour. I'm bringing this to a close. I think the message cutting across is that we need to get concerned about how this country is managed. The issue is a governance question. These loans are our problem, so we must get more vigilant and watch how these resources are put to use. I had with me two gentlemen. I had Moses Mushime, who is a lawyer and economist. He's also the current executive director of Open Health Network and a partner with partner Chibuka, Rashid, and Company Advocates. It's always good to have you. And also with me, I had Charles Muloz Olwenyu, who is the public policy analyst and human rights defender, and also currently works with Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. It's always a pleasure to have you. Gentlemen, we bring it to a close. Till next time, I wish you a great weekend. Bye-bye. Take place.